Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more months than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Good day and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Riley Jarvis. Riley is the founder and CEO of thesleepconsultant.com, an organization that helps CEOs and entrepreneurs and high performers transfer their sleep to significantly boost their productivity and energy levels. Riley started through his own health journey many years ago and discovered that sleep was the missing link that brought everything together. After hacking his own biology by learning from top doctors in the field and furnishing his own education on this subject, he has developed a state-of-the-art approach that aims to get to the root of the issue rather than putting a band-aid on symptoms. And he's just getting started. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Riley. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Thank you so much, Dwight. It's a pleasure to be on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to have you on. I've been looking forward to this conversation. So, Riley, one of the things I focus on my podcast, and many people, some like it, some don't. I focus on the origin story, and that doesn't mean where did Riley from the time he finished high school go? I want to know your earliest recollections, because who Riley is today, if you haven't thought about it, is about your childhood. It goes all the way up from good, bad, and ugly. And it gets people such as myself and the listeners and people watching a closer connection to you so that your message resonates with us even more. So can you do me a favor, Riley, and please tell me your origin story and what key things from your childhood to adulthood that led you to where you're at currently?
That's a really good question. So going back many decades, my earliest recollection memories, I was probably, like 2, 3 years old. I'm Canadian born and raised. I'm originally from Vancouver, and my dad was part of the hospitality industry. He kind of worked his way up. So by the time he was born, he was a higher up manager working at Weston primarily. And he eventually had been there for 25 years before moving on. But at the time, because of that, he was moving from city to city. So we were in Vancouver, where I was born. And then I think at 5, I moved to Calgary. Then it was back to Vancouver, London, Ontario, and then Ottawa. And, I was constantly trying to switch schools. And eventually, I'm the oldest of 3 other brothers as well. There's 2-year gap between all of us. So I remember when we were younger, we would get into a lot of fights, fist fights in particular. And, we would never hold grudges, but we would settle it over, or the fist or throwing pillows and stuff at each other. And, sometimes it got violent as brothers would do it. Parents hated it at the time, but yeah, at least now we're all pretty close with each other. But it was really interesting because my dad was traveling all over the place. My mom wasn't working. She was a stay-at-home mom. And because of that, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. We weren't on the very bottom by any means, but what we had to do is find very creative ways to start getting income. And one of the ways we did that is have language exchange students stay with us. So this was Korean and Japanese students. And I got it from a young age, like 5, 6 years old, I can remember, exposure to what the culture was all about, just like how gracious they are. And they were cooking us meals all the time, what the food tasted like. And I found my parents were very open to, just international cultures and stuff like that around the world. So I never felt closed-minded in a way. I felt very internationalized from a young age, even though I didn't travel to, places around the world and see it. And then, sort of fast forward to elementary school, traveling around the world, making new friends, adapting to new environments, circumstances. I think I finally ended up in Ottawa, where I still reside today, even though I moved around a lot, up until the age of, I was grade two. So I must have been, 10 years old, somewhere in that time frame. And so yeah, from there it was making a new set of friends. And then it was just, I remember at the time when there was Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh cards and like all those fun times that were around, the Beyblades. I mean, looking back, you really treasure those memories you have with people. And I remember, I'm sure every country's different, but we would do a lot of what was it called? It was like hockey with a tennis ball, but you were kicking it with your feet. And, just being as kids were, I was really associated with track and field. High jump was probably my forte. I'm 6'2", not at the time, but now I am. But, I was pretty tall for my age. So I definitely had the advantage on that side of things, pretty athletic. But what happened was, as I started to get older, being the oldest, you naturally have the power, not over your brothers in like a tyrannical way, but it's nice having that, like, you can boss them around, tell them what to do, and it's a good thing. But what ended up happening was they started to get taller than me, and they started growing to 6'4", 6'5". So I lost the power pretty quickly. So that was, I remember the transition of like this power slipping through my hands. I must have been like a teenager at the time when we were playing video games and everything else that went with it, but it was all good fun. And then, once I went to high school in Ottawa, and then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I wanted to follow my dad's footsteps, because he had been in Ottawa at that point, for probably 10 years at the time. And he developed quite a big network inside Ottawa with, a lot of high status people, with lawyers and other things. So he would always bring me over to, their places for dinner or for networking events, because he would have a lot of important people come to his Westin hotel. He was the GM of the Westin Ottawa for, a very long time. So because of that, I would meet a lot of these people, like, how do they talk with each other, and how do they, and again, it's kind of going back to when I was a kid with the exchange students. They're from all kinds of different parts of the world, with a lot of different, diplomats, and hearing their stories and their kids. And we became friends with their kids, and it was just all that stuff going on. So it was sort of after that point when, I graduated from high school, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what did I want to go into? Part of it was health, and part of it was business, because I wanted to follow my dad's footsteps. I ended up choosing business, and it was a good thing. So I went to Carleton for finance, and that was my specialty. It was great. I really love numbers and everything like that. But once I graduated and went into the finance industry, it kind of becomes stale. You're doing the same thing every quarter. You're bouncing the balance sheets. It's definitely, being in finance definitely has a status symbol to it, I think, in some ways, where you're part of finance, you're in the stock market, you know how to make money because you're working with money. But eventually what happened was I got sort of sick and tired of it, and it wasn't what I truly wanted to do. And what I found is it was lacking that kind of enrichedness of like understanding different people's stories, because I was just seeing numbers on a spreadsheet on Microsoft Excel all day long. And that's what my dream was, to go to school and become someone you see in the movies. Maybe it was like Jordan Belfort and Wolf of Wall Street, or like some of these other movies like The Big Short. But yeah, the kind of long story short, I was working really long hours in private equity, and 12 to 18-hour workdays sometimes. And at the time I was in my early 20s. I just couldn't do it anymore. To maintain that, you really have to be in the top 1%, or else they're going to let you go, because there's a bunch of people who are waiting in line ready to take your role. So you really have to be firing on all pistons every single day, all day, no matter what the hours are. If you wake up at 7 a.m., go to work all the way till 9 p.m., and then do it again the next day. It's just, until those deals are closed or whatever your boss asked you to do. So I couldn't do that anymore. And my energy started to fade. I was getting brain fog. I was starting to lose weight, and I wasn't sure why. And what ended up happening was they had to let me go. And I went to the doctor really not knowing what was going on. I was accumulating a lot of debt months later, because I was not able to work. And I eventually became bedridden. And seeing tons of specialists. And I went to the gastroenterologist, and the diagnosis was Crohn's disease, which, is inflammation of the bowels. And, there's definitely a spectrum to it. There's one extreme spectrum where people have to be put like on a bag. And then you have, just very minor where it lurks, but it's not around. I was probably, on the high and mid side of things, but it was affecting everything. And it definitely made sense looking back why, because from the scans they were doing, it was just a lot of inflammation inside. So the medications that they were giving me even worse side effects. It was making me feel a whole lot worse than I already was. And these were the people that I went to and trusted. And, doctors are amazing. They save people's lives. I'm just saying, for me, it wasn't really working out. So what I had to do, having my back against the wall, was take health into my own hands. And so the way I did it was because I was home, I was just, studying for hours upon hours on the internet day, scientific studies, understanding how does every single system inside of our body work, like our hormones, our brain, our gut, our thyroid, how are they all intercorrelated with each other? And I did that for years. I think I probably did that for 3, 4, 5 years. Just odd jobs on the side. And this is kind of where entrepreneurship came in, because I was doing these odd sales jobs. But then eventually started getting answers. At the same time, I started investing with the money I had in private doctors around the world, and sort of understanding what was going on, being part of masterminds with other top health professionals, networking with them to try and, make correlations in different pieces of things. And, so one month I would dedicate to, it could be like energy, working out, cardio. One month would be sleep. Another month would be diet, exercise, meditation, yoga, that kind of thing. And when I got to the sleep month that I decided I would just allocate to dedicating on my health, things started to get a lot better really quick, more so than all the other things I was doing. And before I knew it, as the months started to go on, my symptoms started to disappear. My stomach pain started to go away. I was having more energy, started gaining the weight back. And once you get a taste of what it feels like, I just started doing more of it. So optimizing sleep, talking to people how I can do it more, doing lab testing on myself to see what was going on. So the lab testing numbers were improving. I was feeling better. So I knew something was definitely headed in the right direction. This kind of what got me obsessed at the time with sleep. And sure enough, maybe 1 or 2 years later, I kind of became the sleep expert known in my local community, helping friends of friends. And then it just sort of expanded from there. And it was kind of just brought it online, created products, and now it's worldwide around the world. But now it's not just helping people on a disease state where I was. I like to use that as a story of, if I came from this extreme, even if you're like a little bit tired or you're looking to improve this, you definitely and for sure can. I've seen people from all walks of life, all ages, all backgrounds really improve their health, their sleep, their productivity, their focus, really like that optimization to become a top 1% performer. A lot of those kind of people that I work with, it really comes down to sleep. And yeah, up until today, it's just been an amazing experience.
Yeah, it's amazing what since you're 2, 3 years of age, you've gone through a lot of movement. You've gone through, and you talked about the fact that you got to go for dinner and got to see some pretty high powerful people because of your dad and his association at the Westin Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, you've seen the superficial side of success, because a lot of those people you met because you were so young guaranteed were like you. Yeah. Right? Like you would experience as a person in your 20s, lack of sleep. And what do the doctors do again? And this isn't to pick on doctors. Here's a Band-Aid, right? And you talk about that, and we talk about that in your site. You talk about that we talk about it in your bio. And the bottom line, some people, you do need medication, but a lot of times it's society putting so much pressure on us, and thus we put it on ourselves. It's expectations of our childhood, what we've seen from our parents. Because you might today know, but back then you wouldn't have known if your dad was under stress from lack of sleep. Or trying to run such a high-end hotel and dealing with all the pressures of expectations on him. And a lot of our troubles, like you mentioned at the end of your story, was fixed with sleep. Your symptoms started to disappear. And I know myself, I've seen that as well. If you don't get proper sleep, listeners, people watching, it affects you. And we have a society today that is so about, I look at all these entrepreneurs and people that I follow. I listen to, used to listen to some of their podcasts because they're such driven to success that they'll tell you, you're up late, you get up early. And I'm thinking, when do you get sleep? And throughout that period of time, even when they're waking hours, all their focus is business. And I could see that with you doing, when you were doing the finance side of it and, 12, 18-hour days, I've been there. I can totally relate to that. And your energy never gets recovered. And throughout that process of lack of sleep, we're quickly eating because we're putting so much pressure on ourselves to perform. So we're not nutritionally feeding our bodies properly, which isn't
Exactly.
feeding our
Yeah.
brain properly. Our
Yep.
brain's exhausted because we never ever get into a state of relaxing sleep. And,
Hmm.
I look forward to learning more about that from you. But yeah, you can see the pattern of where
Yeah.
you are to where you're at. And good for
Thanks,
you that
Amal.
you spent time, invested some of your own cash, right? You researched, like you said, 3 to 4 or 5 years. You researched on the internet, invested money to research and go out and discover. But the
Yeah.
the thing is you woke up one day and said, "I got to give a heck about my life. I can't
It's just
stay in this state anymore.
yeah.
I need to change my life." And
Totally.
listeners, you need to change your own life and love yourself, right? Learn what makes you tick, because you're
Hmm.
never going to be able to help others and serve others if you don't
Yeah.
learn to love yourself
Absolutely.
and figure out why you are what you are. And if
For
your
sure.
discovery comes back to it being part of your childhood, that's
Hmm.
okay. That's part of
Hmm.
the growth of life and moving forward. So I appreciate your story. That was great. So Riley, how exactly does sleep help CEOs, entrepreneurs, and high performers boost their productivity and energy levels?
A lot of different ways, and sleep is kind of one of those. So I usually call them the three amigos to health and productivity. So you got food, like the diet, so the food you're intaking, so you're in your body. One, diet. Number two, exercise is movement, so it could be yoga, weightlifting, aerobic exercise, all that kind of thing. And then three is sleep. And a lot of us know, or at least the scientific literature knows, I mean, weightlifting, bodybuilding, it's been around for so many years. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger, like going back, we've really refined that science down. Same with diet, we really know a lot of stuff about that, but sleep is kind of that missing pillar where the science is in its infancy stages. And that means, like, it's so interesting to just see the literature that's coming out about this every single day. And a really good scientist who's studying this stuff is Matthew Walker. He has that famous book, Why We Sleep, and he's kind of made this whole sleep movement mainstream and internationalized. That he released probably 5 or 6 years ago or something like that. But the way he talks about it is with this childlike wonder. And it's not just we should think about sleep where we close our eyes and then we wake back up again. We're ready to go for the day and we just put sleep on the back burner. We have to think about it as like an actual tool in our toolbox that we can utilize to optimize every single part of our biology. So the first part with sleep really comes down to mindset and kind of deconditioning ourselves. Like if we don't know the why of why we're doing something and making our sleep a priority, then we probably never will, because it'll always be in the back of our mind. And we'll put, in the passenger seat and, if it's work, business, whatever it is, in the driver's seat. So that's kind of that first piece. But getting into sleep, what it actually does to the body is many things. From a high level, it improves energy if we get our sleep on point. And we're really looking to optimize our human potential as much as we can. And this is our brain, it's our body, it's our hormones. And I can get into all this in a moment. Energy. Number two is focus, and focus for long periods of time. That goes hand in hand with kind of like mental endurance, like not just being able to focus for short spurts, but that deep focus where you, like, if somebody's ever felt like they're just in the zone for a period of like 2 or 3 hours of just total flow where there's no distractions, it's just you and the thing, a complete clarity. That's kind of a state you can get to when you get your sleep down. The next one is for example, your emotional intelligence, how well you deal with people. Can you pick up on social cues, the tonality in your voice, smiling, just all these different things? Because everybody experiences when we don't sleep that well, where we'll get angry at our colleague, at our friend, at our spouse, at our kids, a lot more easily compared to if we do get a lot of sleep. And this is where caffeine can come in and it can help us, but I can say more on this later on too. It is a band-aid on a much bigger issue. And what my argument is if our biology was optimized in the best way it should be and all our systems were firing on all pistons, then really we shouldn't be experiencing any of those symptoms to begin with. But because we are, sometimes there's a dysfunctional somewhere in our biology. It's not a disease state. It's not necessarily something that's dangerous, but just on a functional state, something that might be a little bit out of alignment. And what do we do for that? We go for coffee to make us feel more alert if we sacrifice sleep and we don't feel awake or alert enough. It could be for getting to sleep, and we'll go for alcohol to help wind down, or sleeping pills. all these things to mask something that we should already be fully optimized in anyway. And what I would say is like, yes, people do need that. It can really help and save people's lives, but it shouldn't necessarily be the first thing that we do. It should be maybe the second or third thing we do. Number one should be optimizing as much as we can naturally, that we are in control over. So that's sort of everything there. You also have number 4 and 5, like anti-aging effects. You have our ability to think more clearly, like brain fog. Also our physical ability to produce, hormones. So somebody wants to build muscle, stay lean, lose weight, metabolism. This is all super, super important. Same with injuries. Like we get our biggest release of human growth hormone, which is so important for repair of our physical body. And, sometimes people I'll see have injuries for years. They've been seeing physiotherapists, for example, like their elbow or their shoulder. It could be somewhere in their back. It could be for acupuncture or just certain different modalities. But it's not until they start fixing their sleep and they're actually getting a release of this human growth hormone to help repair, they're like, wow, that pain's starting to go away now. They don't necessarily know why. And it's not an overnight process. It could take weeks, it could take months. But it's just so amazing to see that when we optimize our sleep, everything which is essentially where we are repairing ourselves, starts to come back online.
Yeah, it's wow. Listeners, you should rewind that. That I got some great notes, things that I'm familiar with. You talked about the three amigos. You talked about food, exercise, and sleep, and I know there's more details like you had mentioned in that. Really, though, when people have lack of sleep, and you tied into that, they go for caffeine to wake themselves up, and then they can't sleep properly because maybe it is too much caffeine. It's not even just coffee, though. I look at the epidemic of all the energy drinks right now, and it's scary.
That's
what it does. It's not even just the caffeine. It's the amount of sugar. It's the amount of what they're doing to a person's body, and then their body becomes so reliant on it. And really, our brains don't like all that caffeine. People don't realize if you have a cup of coffee now or an energy drink that has caffeine, it's 8 hours before your brain even winds down. Maybe it's 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever, but it's a long time for your brain to wind down. It took me years to realize to stop having caffeine after a specific time in the day. So 3-4 o'clock, I don't want to have any more caffeine. I have it in the morning because I enjoy coffee. It's not to wake up, though. I'm alert. I've changed my sleeping patterns a long time ago. And for me, I don't know if there's a specific sweet spot in regards to that, but we can discuss that in a moment in regards to how many hours. But I do know, though, if I program myself to go to bed in a great state, not needing anything to go to bed, like you mentioned, sleeping pills or alcohol or whatever, just go to sleep, that I wake up in the morning. I wake up before my alarm goes off. I still set an alarm because you never know. I don't want to miss whatever I have scheduled or whatever, but I usually wake up before that, and I do things. I have gratitude exercise that I do before I even get out of bed. I've learned different things, and listeners, listen to this. You can program yourself just like a computer. We program it to do specific things. You can get good habits. And when Riley talked about food, exercise, sleep, well, if you're not sleeping properly, you're taking the caffeine. You're eating in the morning, you're eating unhealthy, you're having donuts, you're having stuff that way too much carbs, bad carbs, like way too much sugar. And then your thought process by 10, 11 o'clock, you're lulling off. And then what are you doing? More caffeine, more
Exactly,
caffeine.
Vicious cycle.
The crap food you ate, depending on what you ate, hasn't even completely digested, and noon hits, and you're doing what? Society says you got to eat again. And then it takes 6 to 8 hours, for that to actually process in your body. And, you hit supper time and people eat way too much. Then they're lethargic at night, and they'll have a pop. They got sugar and caffeine or whatever the case may be. Food, exercise, and sleep are essential. Exercise, wakes our brain up. Doesn't matter what time of the day it is, right? Whether it's just walking or doing whatever, and eating healthy. But the three things you mentioned, I still think sleep's the most important. Number one. And then the food and exercise, because if you're not getting proper sleep, chances of you wanting to consistently go 7 days a week and build a good habit for exercise, or just from my coaching business and coaching people and just throughout
Exactly.
my life, it's tough,
Yeah,
right?
very tough. Yeah,
Very tough. So, I like how you talked about it though. Caffeine is a band-aid.
it is.
I enjoy having
Great.
coffee,
Yeah, it tastes great.
right? But I
Yeah.
know that like this time of the day, where I'm in Alberta, you're in Ottawa, I'm in Edmonton, I won't have caffeine. I'll have
Mhm.
herbal tea. I'll have something
Good.
that's
Yeah,
still it's that just that act of having something warm, especially in our
right.
cold weather. All right.
Absolutely.
You understand that. And then,
Yeah.
I like how you've also mentioned injuries and the recovery due to lack of sleep. I
Hmm.
think about that.
Hmm.
You think about how people, when they're tired, they're not
Hmm.
relaxed, so their shoulders are up.
Yeah.
They don't breathe as well. So then
Yeah.
they're tense, and then they have a sore
Yeah.
neck and they have sore shoulders, and
Exactly.
it continually
Yeah.
compounds itself. So have
Mhm.
you worked with a lot of people in regards to injuries and sleep? Is that something that you focus on to help them?
Yeah, it's definitely a massive part, and especially with, so for me in particular, it's a lot of high performers. So this is people who are looking to optimize a lot of their biology as much as their biology as they can to get like all those 1%, so they can be firing, like on 100% of their human potential. I mean, if you had a scale from like 1 to 10, usually your average person, let's say, is operating at like a 3 or a 4, and for them to feel better, like they're just looking to feel like 6 or a 7. But for these high performer types, they're already in an 8 or a 9. They're just looking to get to a 10. So for them, it's really tracking their sleep and like an aura ring. It looks like this. And just sending them lab test kits and looking at their biology, looking at their blood, their hormones, their brain neurotransmitters, and just all these things. Is just kind of taking it to the next level. But it's all relative too, right? It's all based on how do you feel now. You don't have to go from 0 to 100 in the matter of a month or two. You can feel so much better by just improving by 10%. And what does it take to get to that 10%? It's just maybe going to bed at time, or reducing blue light, or some of these things that we can get into after. But just a lot of low hanging fruit. And one thing I didn't mention was diet is very difficult to follow. And same with going to the gym. Like you wake up, you hate the feeling of putting your shoes on, going to the gym, lifting weights, doing long intensive cardio. Or with the diet, you just know you have to plan. You go to the grocery store, it's like 3 teaspoons of this, or like 4 like cloves of garlic and 5 cups of this, and it's just so complicated. We don't want to follow it. Compared to sleep is something we're doing already. And for the return on investment for our health and for our energy and everything that we can give for ourselves, it's just one of the easiest things that we can do. So it's good now that more people are becoming awake to it, and who knows where it'll go in a few years time. But yeah, more people are definitely becoming more health conscious, and sleep is that one thing where the hustle culture to get ahead, opposed to focusing on your biology first, to live a more effortless experience, so you can just operating. Because people probably realize too that, like, do you ever get those days where people are just reacting nicer to you more? You're focused, you're on point. Maybe you didn't have a coffee that day, you just feel great inside, you don't feel bloated. We may have times in our lives, we may just have days of that year in our life, and we don't know what that correlation is. But if we think about those days, imagine being able to maximize those days where just like that, maybe plus more every single day. And just because this is another controversial thing too, is we think aging as a society is, as we naturally age, we'll start to slow down. And it's like, well, of course we're experiencing these symptoms because we're just aging, and as part of aging, it's just part of the process, which is true to a degree. But the thing is there's people who I've worked with before, 40, 50, 60 years old. They feel better then than they had in the last 20 years. And they just don't remember a time like they're out playing sports again, or they're out doing certain things. There's a new genetic test. It's kind of a side note, which is pretty cool, but it shows you 2 different forms of age. And there's a guy out of Harvard who wrote a book on this. I think it's called the Horvath clock or something, but it's all based on what your age is. So for example, if somebody's 40 years old and people's, if it's his 40th birthday, but then you also have your biological age, and that is what your internal clock sort of is. So some people are 40 and they're actually 40. Some people are 40, but their biology is actually 50 from, unhealthy lifestyle habits. But then you have people who are like 40 and their biological clock might show like 25. And that's where things get very, very interesting. And that's where they can perform. And we know people, who exist in society. There's not too many of them, But like I have some friends who have a grandpa who are just like out lifting weights, and they can outlift like all of my friends at the gym and stuff like that. And it's just, how did he do that? And if you look back in his history, you can just see he's been optimizing his health for a long period of time. He's probably prioritized sleep, and it could have just been by mistake. It's not that he knows all the sleep science and he's doing it that way, but sometimes people just you can be genetically gifted. That's it too, but your genetics aren't always your destiny, so to speak. And even if you have poor genetics, you can definitely overcome that.
Yeah, I like what you had to say though. When you talk about older people feeling better, and our overall health being with sleep, exercise, obviously food, water intake's huge in there too.
For sure.
Our society today doesn't drink enough water when they're tired. They drink caffeine when really they could be thirsty. They're dehydrated, and if they hydrated more, I know myself over the years. You also mentioned about your return on investment with sleep, and then tracking it and stuff. Like you showed a ring. I've been tracking my sleep for years with my Apple Watch.
Awesome.
And I started before my Apple Watch, before they had things like, where I could wear a watch. I started using just an app where I'd leave it running on my nightstand, and it could record my sleep patterns, and I'd go and listen. I'd watch the little things, and like the little graph, and it would show that I was talking in my sleep, and I go listen to it. And this was probably a decade ago. It's, listeners, there's been stuff out there a long time. Sleep has been something that we don't take serious enough. Yeah. And I started taking it more and more serious. Then I'd fall off the wagon and I'd get back on, just like exercise or anything else. It's just like, oh, I'll get more sleep. I'll catch up on my sleep. Guess what? You can't catch up on your sleep. In my opinion, that's a bunch of malarkey. It's impossible.
It really is. Yeah.
Right? How can you catch up on sleep?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to work hard all week, and then this weekend I'll sleep in. I'll be better. Yeah. No, you need to do it consistently, and it's developing a habit. So, older people feeling better, again, food, exercise, sleep, water intake. Like I get people that are shocked that I'm in my 50s, right? That I have 5 kids, 5 adult kids, 4 grandkids.
Wow.
Right? And then you look at people that are I love how you said it. You can see people in their 50s that are like in their 30s. You get people that are 30s that look like they're in their 50s.
Yep.
Right?
That's just it. Yeah.
I look at people in their 50s, my age, and their skin's saggy all over their place, and their shoulders are always tense, and they don't look happy. They're always tired, and they'll go, well, how do you do it?
Yeah.
Water intake, nutrition. It's all things that I've had to... Yeah. This is, to me, it's just like personal development with your 6 inches between your ears, your brain.
Yep.
Your body, your sleep, everything, that's a work in progress the rest of your life. You can't slack off. Yeah, you'll develop a habit, but then your associations of people in your life can help drag you back.
Yeah, totally.
Right? They can help drag you back down to, you're not having a donut with us. You're not going to have dessert after supper. Well, you know what? I'll tell them, like, listen, I found that having something sweet after I've studied nutrition too long, that's like your body triggers and goes into food storage. You're eating too much carbs. Your brain gets what it wants. It says, oh, I'm full. Yeah. It's temporary. Then later on you get hungry and your body hasn't even processed what you have, and then you have something else. And it's just, it becomes a vicious circle with the coffee, lack of exercise, lack of nutrition. No wonder people in their 50s looking like they're in their 70s, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's become their new normal for years.
Yeah, like I still get, obviously, if I still had hair, it might help too. But I get a lot of people that are shocked that I'm 54 years of age, right?
Yeah,
that I got 5 kids and 4 grandkids.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see. I mean, you don't see it much, but
So again, I'm not saying I'm a poster child for anything. I'm saying, listeners, it takes work. What Riley's talking about, it takes work. You track your sleep. My watch tracks. I know when if I've had something go on with my kids or in my career or my business, and I can actually go and my watch will track it to an app that I bought. I don't use just the app from Apple. I bought an app which actually shows how much I'm in REM, how restless I am. And I can actually, if I've woke up and I feel kind of off and I go look, it records it. It tells me that I'm not sleeping well. And I might have forgotten something. I don't know whether you agree or disagree. I might have forgot to do when I go to bed, I pray and I have gratitude about things. And then I fall asleep in that state, meaning I'm
Mm.
thinking about it right up to drifting off. And I know I
Yeah.
read on your site where you talked about the fact of helping people learn how to fall asleep within 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I literally fall asleep now with the things that I've developed. I'm not saying, like you said, it's sometimes we're just fluky at it.
Yeah.
I've gotten to a point where I fall asleep within minutes, literally
Wow.
minutes,
That's amazing.
right? And
Yeah.
I wake up usually about 10, 15 minutes before my alarm's supposed to go off.
Hmm.
And sometimes I'm a little groggy,
Hmm.
right? That's just life. Maybe I eat something the day before I shouldn't have, and it's still affecting me, right? Because I'm pretty staunch about my nutrition and my sleep, but we're not
Mhm.
perfect.
Yeah, that's just it. And that's one thing I tell people too is you want to think about your sleep and your biology like a bank account. You want to have such a surplus in your bank account. And what that translates to is just consistent sleep, your diet, and everything else. That any time that you want to withdraw from that bank account and maybe go to unhealthy habits, you can afford to because everything in your healthy bank account is just, compounding and you can afford to make those
I
those
like that.
withdrawals sort of thing.
I like
Yeah.
that healthy bank account. I like that. Well, it's true though,
Yeah.
right? People say to me, "Oh, are you always so staunch about everything?"
Yeah.
Because I do. I have people. We'll have conversations. I'll be coaching people. Because 19 years in my finance with my finance agencies, coaching and training agents within my agency, coaching and training my clients, and I
Mhm.
do. I talk to them about health. And
Mhm.
one of the things I did back in 2014, it's already been 8 years ago. I went and got what's called it's a Canadian designation called Elder Planning Council (EPC). It's from
Mm.
Canadian Institute for Elder Planning Counseling, and it's all about your business isn't just about finance and numbers, Dwight.
Mhm.
You need to listen to your clients. You need to find out about their nutrition, their
Mhm.
sleep,
Yeah.
and so this designation isn't just for finance people. It's for
Mhm.
I've met nurses, doctors,
Mm.
accountants,
Oh,
lawyers,
wow.
people that want to take it to help uplift their mindset so they can better serve others, their clients, their
Interesting.
families. And I've had this
Huh.
designation. I have to get credits for it every year and renew it.
Mhm.
There's only a few thousand of us across Canada
Mm.
that are part of it, that stick with it, and it's made a huge difference. It's just my
Mhm.
point for bringing that up is we always got to continually work on leveling up our lives,
Yeah.
right? And
That's just
understanding
it.
it's okay to have. I have a healthy bank account and
Yeah.
a health bank account, part of me, and I decide, I'm going out this weekend, and normally I don't have dessert, but oh my
Yeah.
gosh, they talk about their special and the dessert sounds good.
Yeah.
Darn it anyway, I'm gonna have that dessert.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know I'm going to
And you
pay a little
deserve
bit of
to.
a price.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm going to
Yeah.
pay a little bit of a price, but my
Yeah.
health bank account
Yeah.
is good enough. I love how you put that. How it'll offset it. So you don't.
Yeah.
So listeners, we're not telling you you have to live a life like a robot.
Yeah.
We're saying
That's it.
develop good habits so that when you want to check out for an hour or check out for a day or check out
Mhm.
for, let's say I've gone on holidays for a week. I went
Yep.
to Greece a couple of years ago. And I normally don't eat bread. Well, damn it. Balsamic vinegar and oil in their bread they give you,
Yeah.
I ate it because it was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Don't blame you.
When
It's
I got
yeah.
back, I had to detoxify though. All right,
Yeah.
I still, don't get me wrong. I didn't just throw caution to the wind and eat whatever I wanted to. I still followed a
Mhm.
routine, but there was moments and opportunities where, when if you've ever been to Greece,
Yeah.
they bring out desserts. You don't
Yeah.
order dessert. They're bringing it out at the end of the meal. They're bringing out the
Yeah.
bread. It's such a
Can't say no to
rich
that.
part. Oh yeah, you couldn't. So
Yeah.
listeners, I'm not saying you got to be an automaton. Enjoy life, but
Yeah.
get habits where you have a health bank. I love
That's
how you
right.
put that. So what are some of the pushbacks you get from people when you talk to them about sleep and their ability to perform better in life?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one because the first thing, a lot, especially when you work with people who have been so conditioned, is when, in particular, where I came from, the finance industry, where they're all about results, all about numbers, and it's this culture thing too, right? Like, think about the Wolf of Wall Street movie. Imagine one of those guys sleeping less or prioritizing his sleep and telling the team, "Hey guys, I'm not going to make it in for the next few hours because I'm going to be sleeping in tonight." I mean, he would be looked at and he'd be mocked on for so. So it's kind of like that to a degree across all industries. in some ways it's just kind of developed. It's great because with the science, more awareness is coming around with the importance of sleep and showing you can actually get more productivity with it. So step one is always deconditioning people and showing people like they can't change anything. It's kind of like the first step in AA. You don't know until you have awareness of it. So kind of pinpointing that to them. Usually it's just a short presentation that'll give them where society as a whole, I don't want to, point the finger at them because everybody is going through it. It's just showing like, look, this is what's happening with a lot of people. And then you see their eyes open up and now they'll be very receptive to what you have to say. So once you kind of get to that blank slate after deconditioning, then we go into kind of the new model of sleep. Like, what does that actually look like for people? And that's by prioritizing your sleep. You can get way more done. You can get into that deep focus way more. Like imagine being able to finish your workday 1 or 2 hours earlier. And there's people I work with who can easily do that because, they get to work, let's say like 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. They're just guns blazing into whatever project they have to do and they get it done. And then for the rest of the day, they have nothing else to do. And they're able to go home, spend time with their loved ones or friends, do whatever hobby they want to do for themselves. Maybe it's a side project that they want to work on as a side income to make even more money. Whatever you choose to do in your life, you can do that just because you have that extra time. Plus, you have the energy to do it. Not, people get home from work and they're super tired and they go straight to Netflix and crack open a beer and a very heavy carb meal. And then the process repeats itself because from all that junk they put in their body, they can't sleep that well. And what do you know? They need more caffeine because of it. So it's kind of everything that you pointed out earlier. But yeah, it's kind of just that whole idea of just showing people that they can get way more performance with prioritizing their sleep first. But for some people who have been burning the candle from both ends for years, sometimes decades, it could be a little while of a process. So sometimes the recovery period could be days, weeks. For some people, I mean, this was for me because I was burning the candle at both ends for a long time. Even though I was super young, it was about 1.5 years, 2 years before stuff really started to come back online. But sure enough, I was way better, way healthier, way more focused, mental clarity, all that stuff than I ever was starting from where I was prior. And it's sort of the same case with a lot of people because inflammation starts to go down in the body. Our hormones become more optimized. And we're just, like I'm saying, is just everything is functioning way better. And the result of that, people don't understand necessarily what's happening in our biology. And you don't need to. And that's sometimes why having a guide is good to point you in the right direction, kind of explain that to you. All we know is just how we experience the world through our senses. And if you can experience the world through your senses on a scale of 1 to 10, like 9 or 10 out of 10 on a daily basis versus 3 out of 10, imagine what that would do over a period of days, weeks, months, compounded that over to years. If you were to look back, at your old self as your new self now, like imagine looking back how far you've come, what you were able to achieve in your life, more money, more better relationships, just all the things that go along with it. When I put things in those terms for people, especially if they came from a place that, sleep was the last thing that was on their priority list, they start to change pretty quickly. And then all it takes is them just getting a taste of what that new normal feels like. And then I'm like, see, I told you would start to feel better. And they'll start doing it more and more and more. And that becomes a new healthy addiction.
So that habit gets developed. And yeah, I like how you put it though, deconditioning people. We're so caught up in a society of go 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 and people prior to and how many times have we heard that statement, I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like honestly, at the rate you're going, you're gonna be dead.
Yeah.
You need to. And one of the things I really like though is you talked about, and I look at it as associations. And the question I have for you and want your comments on is, we do all this work. So you help these people go through deconditioning and help them with a new model of sleep and realizing that, if you can learn to work from, let's say 8 to 12 or 9 to 1 or whatever, the rest of the day is yours. Mm-hmm. What do people, what are you finding though? Is there associations? Like, are there associating with people? Like, do you talk to them about the fact, okay, your family is going to see a change in you. Your workers are going to see a change in you. The people you work with, if you're in a career and you don't have a business, they're going to see changes in you and they're going to try to pull you back. So do you have to work on the mental conditioning portion of it to teach them how to block out the associations and possibly change the associations they have?
Good question. So what I normally do, this is all part of the preliminary question I have with people. It's like, what is your ultimate goal here? And like, what are those associations? Because it's almost like smoking. Like you to quit cold turkey, or like coffee for that matter, it can be very difficult. And the withdrawal symptoms you get from that with any habit, whether healthy or unhealthy, can be very difficult to stay away from because it's out of the norm. And that's how our bodies are just evolutionary evolved, is to just stick on habits and to adapt to things, and we don't like to go out of our comfort zone. We're creatures of habit, and anything outside of that will give us negative emotion. So what I tell people is this: when let's say, for example, they finish their workday at noon and they got everything they wanted to do, we with that extra time, it just depends on what that person's goal is. If it's somebody, let's say, for example, in the finance industry, and I can tell what switches them on is making money. I'm like, imagine being able to make way more money. And how do you do that? We reverse engineer it. Well, how much is 1 hour of your time worth? Well, imagine being able to have that much more time available to you, and then you kind of work backwards from there. Sometimes with a lot of women you work with, for them it's relationships, and they've been putting off a lot of friendships, or just certain things like that. So for them, being able to showcase them, like, imagine all this free time you'd have to yourself or to your friends, but also yourself too. Maybe it's now you have time, instead of just like working till 5 o'clock or rushing home, or going home in rush hour traffic, eating dinner, feeding the kids, tucking them in, and now it's time. You just have 1 hour to yourself on Netflix, and you're just absolutely wiped, and you don't look forward to the next day. Imagine instead you have 4 extra hours and to yourself, and now you can maybe exercise, do yoga, meditation. Well, guess what? Now you can sleep better. Now, because when you wake up, you have so much energy, you don't need to rely on that coffee anymore. Maybe you can go to that social gathering, maybe not so much today, but whenever this whole thing is over, you can afford to you know do whatever you want, whether it's social, whether it's exercise, whether it's maybe reading the new book you wanted to read, to educate yourself further on the things I talked about. It just goes on and on, whatever self-improvement technique you want to do.
Yeah, it's so powerful though what you said. That person that's gone, 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 and let's say they have a family, they have kids, they got laundry to do. All of a sudden, they have 1 hour,
Yeah.
and our most valuable time in our lives, listeners, is our ability to take our own time that we're not trading for dollars
Mm-hmm.
to go and create something for ourselves. Yet we're so exhausted because of the hamster wheel of life we're on, and we don't know how to live life on purpose. We're living it by accident, as
Mm-hmm.
Riley mentioned. Netflix and whatever, a glass of wine or a beer, and then they tell themselves, society tells them, because it's so sensationalized in movies and TVs, everybody's drinking alcohol
Yeah.
late at night, that we figure we deserve it, and really
Yeah.
we don't deserve it. Our body doesn't deserve it. Your
Yeah.
mindset thinks you deserve it, but that the repercussions of it fall
Mm-hmm.
into the next day. Then you're, like you
Yeah.
said, adding caffeine, and it's just, I call it the hamster wheel of life. Go to
Yeah, it
work, go
really
home,
is.
get paid, and it's
Yeah.
just, it's sad.
Yeah.
Listeners, just realize though, in this last, we've been talking quite a while here. I love what Riley's saying, because it reaffirms that the journey that I'm on is going to continue on, and it continue. It gives me energy, and the associations of what I've associated in my past life. You can get that sooner than me. I've
Mm-hmm.
been working on this for probably, I'd say, about 14 years, 15
Mm.
years. And I'm in my mid 50s. Could you imagine what it would be like if you were started this in your 20s?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's
Could you imagine that carpe diem, seize the
yeah.
day? Could you imagine there's nothing that could stop your life if you can
Mm.
learn that sleep, nutrition, and exercise are three of the core things, and
Yeah.
wrap that up into what are you associating with, what is holding you back from doing those things? Your
Yeah.
friends, your family, what you watch, what you listen to, right? What are you
Mm-hmm.
telling yourself from the moment
Mm-hmm.
you go to bed to the moment, what's your brain telling you when you're sleeping?
Mm-hmm.
What do
Yeah.
you get up? What do you tell yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, I got an 8 hour day ahead. Or are you saying to
Yeah.
yourself, like Riley was saying, oh, I can do this from 8 to noon, and then I own the rest of my day. Now I get to do
Yeah.
my side hustles. So let's say
Yeah.
you're working at a career. Now you can start your own business on the side.
Hmm.
right? And then there's people such as my friend Tony Watley, he's got a book called The Side Hustle Millionaire. He's got
Hmm.
coaching programs. We're good friends, and he teaches people how to take those free hours and create a side hustle that can
Amazing.
replace your main hustle. Can you imagine, listeners?
Yeah.
You take that noon to whatever 5 o'clock, work your side hustle, do whatever it is. Maybe you already have a business, but now you learn how to do it more efficiently. So that
Hmm.
all of a sudden you have your whole life is seizing the day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I love that
It
though,
really is.
right? So you talk about you hacked your own biology by
Hmm.
learning from the top doctors in the field, and you did mention some of this. We've talked about this already. Is the field of sleep research, you did touch on it though, is it
Hmm.
vast in the medical industry? And did you have trouble getting people to take you serious on this journey?
It's very interesting because one part was, like who, because a lot of people would go see their sleep doctor and they'll go for some, it's called a polysomnograph, which is basically means a sleep study. And then it'll diagnose, if you have sleep apnea, if you have narcolepsy, and a lot of these medical conditions in the disease state. And like this medical industry is amazing for diagnosing certain like diseases. For example, like a colonoscopy to diagnose Crohn's or an MRI, and these kind of things. But when you get to more of the like how we feel just on a day-to-day basis within a functional range, what really requires is taking more of this sensitive model to things of how we feel. And we think, well, if I don't have a disease, well, I'm fine until, we follow a poor lifestyle or poor sleep and all these things until, something comes knocking at our door and it's like, oh, I should have been addressing that a little bit sooner. So there's kind of two ways of looking at it. But for me, in the early stages, people with the whole sleep thing have either previously seen a doctor and they're like, well, why should I trust you over my doctor based on what you're telling me? And I say, look, what I am here to do is just act as your guide, as your coach alongside with your doctor. And you can take the advice, you don't have to. But if you choose to stick with the advice, more likely than not, you're going to start to see really good results. And it's really interesting sometimes when people start doing a lot of these things, not necessarily just following what I tell them, but just start following a healthy lifestyle. You see them again and again going back to their doctor. And the doctor looks at their lab tests and like, what did you do? And then suddenly they're able to go off their medication and all these other things. And it's kind of like the last 5 years, my Crohn's has just been in 100% complete remission. And when I go, like if I was to just go to a doctor, they see it's gone, but they don't necessarily know why. So it's this whole idea, right? It's just eventually the science will get there to prove and back it up, in my opinion. But a lot of the time, it's like whatever's on the forefront of science, and let's say they make a new scientific discovery, before that becomes adopted into the mainstream as part of the day-to-day, just your average family practitioner's practice, that can take like 10 to 15 years. So my question to people is, do you want to be on the cutting edge of something that may work and probably does work, or do you want to wait 10 to 15 years, for something like that to happen? But for me, I want to be on the forefront of that science. And that's why I always like looking to these studies, what's coming out. And to answer your other question about is a sleep literature, is there a lot of it out there? The question is, yes, there is. Even though it is in its infancy stages, sleep is just so complex, and it's just different stages of sleep. How like dreams is another topic. It just goes on and on and on. But what it really comes down to is, especially for the more low hanging fruit things, like for those basic things to sleep better, like blue light, like those application low hanging fruit tips, there's like 10, 20, 30 then that you can do. And for most people that can get them to, let's say they were at like 1 out of 10, that could get them to maybe like 4 or 5 out of 10. It really just depends based on genetics and all of our existing habits and stuff like that. But if you really want to take it to that next level, you can for sure go deeper doing lab test kits on yourself and going to the next level. That's what I do with people for those who are on the extreme end of doing it. But all I want to say is you can go as deep as you want with this stuff, depending on how much time you have, depends what your priorities are. But just to know that these tools exist for you to use, and it's up to you to use them if you choose to.
Yeah, it's I like you talked about doc saying, "What did you do?"
Yeah.
I've had that experience.
Yeah.
I have health issues too, but we won't get into that. Maybe sometime in another conversation. But I had health challenges, inflammation issues, I have a degenerative spine disease. I have other issues that have gotten so much better when I changed my sleep, my nutrition, exercise, just
Yeah.
everything got better. Has it gotten perfect? No, it hasn't gotten perfect because it is a disease. But you know, I even look at the fact of I was diagnosed about I want to say about it's going to be 10 years ago now with cataracts because it's
Huh.
my grandpa had them, my dad just had surgery for them. I have lots of relatives that have had it, and I went to an eye doctor last year, and the eye doctor looked at my eyes. I went to a different eye doctor because my eye doctor's in his 70s now, and I decided I wanted to check out somebody different. And he said, "Well, your file says here that you have cataracts developing." And I said, "Yeah, my you know prior eye doctor said that they've haven't been growing now in 4 or 5 years. Well, what did you do?" I said, "Well, I changed my nutrition. I sleep differently. I associate differently with what I put in between my 6 inches and what I read and what I listen to and who I hang out with. I've done all these different things." And he says, "Well, combination of that," he says "you're not going to need to get cataract surgery." He says, "What did originally when you were just, when they
Wow.
discovered it with me, when are they going to do that surgery?" They said, "Well, they originally said it would be 3, 4 years." And that was
Hmm.
10 years ago.
Huh.
He says, your cataract measurements, he says, from what information I have from the other
Hmm.
medical testing, he says, you could be 10, 15, 20 years before you need cataract surgery. So,
Wow. That's
listeners,
amazing.
something as simple as nutrition and proper
Yeah.
sleep
Yeah.
slow down the process of cataracts in my eyes,
Yeah.
right? When
Yeah.
to originally they thought I'd have to get it in a few years. Well,
Yeah.
that's because my nutrition sucked. I was
Yeah.
stressed out as a single dad raising my 5 kids.
Hmm.
Wasn't sleeping properly. I was that person that worked, cooked for the kids, did laundry, had that hour, and it was just like, I can't think
Yeah.
about doing anything to better my life. I just deserve a glass of whatever and watch
Yeah.
some Netflix or whatever
Yeah.
the case may be, right? So I
Yeah.
can completely relate to that.
Yeah.
Listeners, you can change your lives.
Really
Riley
can.
has, I have. Riley's
Hmm.
continuing to change people's lives. I'm not a sleep expert, but I do talk to people about proper sleep and proper nutrition all the time. And I tie it directly to my practice of my financial coaching and lifestyle practice, along with me getting that designation I mentioned, was all about the fact that I want to help people. It's not just about numbers.
Hmm.
It's about everything. We're all of it's tied together in a circle if we look at it, and everything feeds one another. So start
Yeah.
feeding your circle by getting some good sleep and proper nutrition.
Hmm.
So Riley, you developed, you touched a little bit on it, but I want to talk about this a little bit. You developed a state of art approach that cuts through the noise and gets right to the root of the problem instead of just putting a band-aid on it. You developed a process called sleep nirvana, which is the
Yeah.
perfect balance between maximum performance, client results, and mind body zen. A
Hmm.
balance is accomplished by 6 steps you developed. I know you've touched on some of them. Could you further facilitate some conversation in regards to that 6 steps and how it can make a difference and how it has made a difference for others?
Yes, absolutely. So it really just comes down to removing what's bad and injecting what's good. And, it really dissects from there, but to keep it just very simple for people, if you can just remove what, and like there's what we think is bad versus what is like objectively bad for us. But in order for us to find out like what is objectively bad, that can be a little different just based on our life experiences. So what I tell people is whatever you think that you would define as bad in your life, which is pretty obvious. If you're staying up past midnight when you have to wake up at 6, that's probably something you want to start considering. And a healthy habit might be like drinking more water when you first wake up. One side point I meant to say this earlier was when we sleep from our breath alone, we lose about 1 liter of water. So essentially what that means is we wake up in a naturally dehydrated state. And what do most people do? They go right for caffeine, which is a diuretic, which dehydrates us more. So instead, what we should do is go drink 1 liter of water when we first wake up. Usually put in some lemon in there. You can put in some Celtic or Himalayan sea salt for the electrolytes. And then after 90 minutes, after after we wake up, after 90 minutes, that's when we want to go for our first cup of coffee. I could go into it, but just with our cortisol as our cortisol is starting to hump down, we start ingesting the coffee, whatever the caffeine source is, and then we'll start to get that spike again. So for focus in the morning, that's a really good way to put it. But we really want to go for results. We want to have, we want to make it simple. We want to make it very enjoyable for us. And with all that, what ends up happening is we maximize our energy, focus, creativity, well-being, and then with all that, we'll minimize fatigue, stress, and complexity.
Yeah, I love how this is all stuff that I've been learning about for a long time, and you put everything very precise and very you're very good at explaining it. Obviously, this is your business, this is your career, your entrepreneurship. But I've people think to themselves, like listeners, you may think to yourself, well, I'm robbing myself of enjoyment of life. You can still have enjoyment of life. Riley didn't say take coffee out of your diet. He said wake up. You're going to lose a liter of just through breathing. Drink a liter of water, right? Have your coffee, wait 90 minutes. And it isn't that hard to wait 90 minutes. If the first thing you're doing, listeners and people watching, is getting up and you peel your eyeballs open and you go down and you drink a cup of coffee, you're on a hamster wheel. And I'm just talking from experience. I'm not judging you. I do drink water first thing in the morning. This bottle, the viewers will watch, this holds 29 ounces of water right to the cap. I drink about 4 of those a day. And I drink one first thing in the morning normally. Sometimes I can't drink that much, but a liter of water is quite a bit. People don't realize that. Yeah. If you got to put a little bit of something in it, Himalayan salt is a great thing, like you said, for your electrolytes and stuff. I use a little bit of stevia. I like a little bit of flavoring. It makes it so that I can, and again, there's good stevia and bad stevia, but we won't get into that today either, because I focus a lot on nutrition for my life and sleep, obviously. I put a little bit of that in because to drink a liter of plain water gets boring, but you have a little bit of sweetness or flavor to it. It makes it that much easier. And that's just a little bit of a hack for the people that are listening. But yeah, I love how you talked about that. Just hold off for 90 minutes. You get up. If you start developing a habit like I do a little bit of gratitude. I've already been awake for 25, 30 minutes. Go get ready for my day. I brush my teeth, do whatever you do in the washroom. By the time I get downstairs and let the dog out, do whatever, it's 90 minutes till I have a coffee. Yeah. And even then, I don't chug my coffee. It might take me 30 minutes to drink that coffee. It all depends. Sometimes I drink it really fast, probably just like yourself. But yeah, so many good tidbits of information. Listeners, I hope you're enjoying this episode as much as I, and I hope you honestly take this serious and reach out to Riley. So we hear of individuals that say they only need 4 to 6 hours. Again, we've talked about this a little bit, and they work light. Early to rise is the way to go if you want to be successful. Why has the lack of sleep become such a norm, in your opinion, in our society today, especially for entrepreneurs? Why has that happened? Is it all the outside noise? Is it how they were raised? Is it a combination of everything? What would you, if you could put your finger on that, what would you say it would be?
For sure. In my opinion, it's a combination of everything combined. It's going, to that brainwashing from society, our friends, being like impressing people, even for ourselves, like, especially like for a lot of guys, especially who want to get more done, they're goal achievers essentially. And it all goes back to, why would I sleep less when I can get more done? And for them to consider that you could, if you actually prioritize sleep and get better quality sleep. And this is one thing too, some people just do not have the hours in the day to, get an extra 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep. And I totally understand that. I'm not going to be super strict on those kind of things. So if you do only have 6 hours of sleep dedicated to yourself, why don't we fully optimize those deep sleep cycles so you can wake up the most restored you can with the circumstances that you're given? And when you do so, because most people are only sleep probably like 40% or 50% of their capacity for that, can do that just from like coffee and just all these other things. But when you can fully optimize those sleep cycles, sometimes you can actually feel better off for those 6 hours than if you were to sleep in on the weekend for 8 hours, just because everything is so much higher quality. And as a result, you feel better, and that just manifests into more things. But I think, yeah, people's background, their parents, siblings. I know with my brothers, like I always wanted to be very competitive with them. So it would kind of be like, who was the first one to wake up and like go do the when you were a kid and you deliver papers to your neighborhood and stuff like that. And, it just goes on and on from there. And it just kind of sticks with people. And that's just what they're used to. And I would say too, it's just a lack of our understanding or awareness of what sleep can actually provide us. So it's the more healthy inputs that we receive or over the course of our lives, what better sleep can provide us, that'll start making us question, or at least planting that seed of maybe what I'm doing isn't working for me as much as I thought it would. And then once we start considering that, having better awareness, it's only from there we'll start making those changes. And from those changes becomes habits. And those habits becomes like our life, as Aristotle says.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I think about, as you mentioned, if you only have 6 hours of sleep, have good 6 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Develop habits that are 7 days a week, and that
Yeah.
you're not living for the weekends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So that you can sleep in, or so that you
Yeah.
can go, you live a life of garbage the whole week of what you do, sleep, eating, whatever. And on the weekends, you're going to go and do things right.
Yeah.
It's got to become a habit 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And yes, listeners, you can have cheat days. You can have cheat moments, whatever. But
Yeah.
realize that when you do it, you're doing it because you consciously know that you chose it, and that there could be a consequence for you for the next hour, 24 hours, and you're willing to accept that, because life is about choices. Once we get to a point where we're choosing that, at that moment you're going to live in a life that you used to live, but the next moment you're not going to, and you're going to be right back on the path of life of health, and living a healthier, having that health bank, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Life is better. It really is. We're not saying you can be perfect. I'm not saying, Riley's not saying, just put some effort in. And there's people out there as great as Riley that can help you. That is not a facade. That's another thing. Don't seek out people for life coaching, finance coaching, sleep coaching, whatever kind of coaching, that haven't gone through the school of hard knocks themselves, that have learned that they had challenges, they learned they had to give a heck, and now they're leveling up consistently in life to help others give a heck. That's who you want, and that's who I bring to you on this show, as somebody as amazing as Riley. So Riley, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Great one. So I would say you want to live your life with 100% pure intention. Like, if you are going to rest 100%. Don't just rest 50%. And what that means is like active recovery. We want to be able to, like, instead of going to Netflix, why not do a deep meditation, go for a walk? It could be an Epsom salt bath, it could be a cold shower, whatever that is, to get our body into such a restful state. Really what we're doing is optimizing our time. And then when we decide to work, we're not being distracted by a multitude of things going on. We just focus on the one thing in hand. And once we finish that, then our 100% attention goes to the next thing. And this is a philosophy in itself. I mean, you can expand to being in the present moment and everything with it. But when you're just very intentful with every single moment with each thing you're doing, it's very difficult. I mean, I struggle with it myself some days, but if we can do that day in, day out, we'll be in a much better place. And, it all starts with better sleep.
Wow. Great message. This has been an amazing conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. So our time is almost up. I want to respect our listeners and your time. However, before we end, can you please tell the listeners what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, they can go directly to www.thesleepconsultant.com. And on there, they can actually book a free sleep assessment with me or my team directly, to see, where the challenge is with their sleep, what's going on. And, we'll ask them some questions. Then we've got a ton of free resources we can shoot their way that are custom tailored and everything from there. We also have a free sleep assessment questionnaire. So we'll give you a score of 1 to 10. And based on what your score is, we'll give you custom steps that you can start implementing as well.
That's amazing. So listeners, check it out. I'll make sure that it's in the show notes, which you can find at giveaheck.com. And yeah, so thanks so much again, Riley, for being on. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.